Once I reach 1,000 subscribers, I will always have a live chat on the first Friday of the month at 8 p.m. So please subscribe, click on the bell, and let's get 1,000 subscribers very soon. Good morning and welcome back to Planet Althistory. Today we are going to discuss what if India was never colonized. India was colonized not only by the UK, but also partially and for some time by Portugal, Denmark, France, etc. The thing with this scenario is that India will not be totally overtaken by the UK, but some smaller ports or cities similar to Hong Kong or Macau will stay in European hands. Now, as for India, during the times of the British Raj, places such as today's India, Pakistan, Bangladesh and Myanmar, they were all included. Before the establishment of the British Raj, India was not the United States. There were many smaller principalities that existed in the Indian subcontinent. These states and principalities had different religions, different languages, different cultures. They had sometimes a Muslim majority, they had sometimes a Hindu majority, they had sometimes a more important Sikh minority, and so on and so forth. Moreover, the geographical area as well as the availability to certain resources will also determine the success of some of these countries that will stay independent. So how do we continue with this scenario? What if India was never colonized? Let's say that the Europeans would not see the need to control more land directly or indirectly of India. They would rather focus to keep some cities in their direct control and even populate it with some of their people. The result would be that certain coast cities would be more European and they would be similar to Macau or Hong Kong in terms of architecture, but not necessarily in terms of economy. During the 17th-18th century, India was dominated by the Mughals, and they had a very good economy. Agriculture was, according to several sources, on par with the Europeans. Many people didn't work in agriculture, and there was a lot of manufacturing in high demand. Textiles especially were in high demand, and they were exported to Europe, and India was an important center of production for it. When the Mughals started to decline and the Maratha Empire started to replace them, there was of course problem for the economy and more people started to work in agriculture again, and there was a decline. However, after some decades in this alternate scenario, the Maratha Empire would be able to pick up where the Mughals left, and they could once more get a similar economy as the Mughals. Politically, Maratha would control central India, except for some parts of the coast where they would have vassal states, especially more to the eastern side, or where Europeans would have cities or minor colonies. There would still be Sindh, Burma and places around the Himalaya which would be independent. Maratha would not become an India in this timeline, but become the most dominant power for many years to follow. Parts of Pakistan would stay balkanized, and wars between Sindh and Maratha or their allies or proxy states would happen many times. Burma would stay pretty isolated, and perhaps later on some other nation would try to colonize it. It is very likely that Burma would become similar to Thailand in this scenario, given the fact that their culture is not necessarily close, but the geography and also the influences would somehow be the same. Sindh and Maratha would develop some type of India and Pakistan relation, and war between those two and their smaller allies will break out every now and then. Due to this, and coupled with the geographical area of and around Sindh would end up being the poorer country and being economically weaker compared to their Indian counterparts. Maratha has the chance to develop an extensive network, and they could potentially dominate some parts of the coast, but with the Europeans still in the picture, it is more likely that cities founded and controlled by the Europeans, such as Goa, Bombay or Chennai, would develop into something more similar than Singapore, for instance, or Macau or Hong Kong. Due to the good location of Chennai, it is very possible that Chennai, or a city more like Chennai, could have the advantage given the fact that it could redirect trade routes that come all from East Asia towards Europe, Arabia and Africa. Goa or Bombay would be in direct concurrence, and one of these two cities would, at least for the Maratha Empire, become the door to Europe, whereas in a reverse situation the Europeans would call it their door to India. Industrialization could hit off if the demand would be greater than the quantity of products that exist on the market. India nowadays has a high population, but some 100 years ago it wasn't that high. And coupled with the fact that many people will die due to the constant wars between the independent states, there is a higher chance that someone of the elite from the city-states or maybe from the Maratha Empire would finance the construction of factories and later on also the construction of the railways. Some places will have a better infrastructure than in OGL, while other regions, especially more far away regions, might be totally forgotten as they were not even controlled by anyone important on the world stage. So you would have more places that would be more similar to Bhutan, let's say, or maybe even Nepal, so there will really be not much of a contact. Coal, oil and gas is perhaps not abundant, but there is a high potential that one or several regions of this alternate India will become rich with it and use it to transform their economy in a successful way. Maybe to have it into a more service-based economy in an alternate 21st century. Let's say they would perhaps imitate a country like Luxembourg, where Luxembourg really developed a very fast industrialization, and then they switched into a banking system. And all of this happened in less than 100 years, maybe even 50 years if we want to really put it in a very short picture. So there is a chance that maybe one of these independent Indian nations will do the same. The most western and eastern parts would remain more agricultural and somewhat poorer, whereas some of the independent alternate coast states will get their revenue mostly from fishing, as they would not be able to compete with the city-states such as Bombay, Goa or Chennai. Two threats might pose a great issue for this alternate India. First of all, Russia. Russia always wanted to get an ice report, and given the fact that this India is disunited, it might give Russia some ideas. They could invade and take everything until Sindh. But Russia would probably end up being humiliated, just as it was the case with Japan. The mountainous areas would be a very huge disadvantage for them, and with countries that experienced more wars than in OGL and try to compete with their neighbors and with their rivals and modernize, even if they are more poor, the chances are very high that the native Indian states will even beat Russia decisively. So there is a big chance for this to happen. As long as China stays disunited, it will pose no problem for this alternate India. But fast forward, if we come in a situation, and I will not discuss the World War I and World War II scenario because I think having many independent Indian states will just make it almost impossible. But if we come to a situation, a scenario where we have an alternate World War II-like type of thing going on, and at the end the Second World War will end in the same fashion, the Indian states could have problems, unless they would agree to follow the lead of Maratha, which they probably would not. At the end, some border areas will probably be absorbed by China, and some countries might even turn totally communist, thanks to the support of this alternate Maoist China or alternate communist Russia or Soviet Union, whatever will exist. And the thing is that there will be more proxy wars that can happen, and thus a much more complex dimension to this already complex Cold War could happen if India was never colonized. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetalthistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Alt History.